She expected pain, but he showed her real love. The shackles around Liana Solis's wrists felt heavier than the rare stellarium they were forged from, a metal chosen more for its symbolic value than practical strength. They represented something far crueler than mere restraint. They marked her as property. She sat on the auction platform, flanked by other captives, most with vacant stares and broken spirits. Her golden skin shimmered faintly under the twin suns of Kronos Station, a rare and beautiful hue among the Zephyrian people. It was said to be a mark of royal blood, divine blood. But royal titles meant nothing when your empire had crumbled to dust. The auctioneer's booming voice echoed across the marketplace. Lot 943, female, age 23 standard years, pure Zephyrian lineage, educated, compliant. Perfect for companionship, cultural integration, or other legal services. Liana clenched her jaw. It had been only 4 cycles since the fall of the Zephyrian Empire, overthrown in a war no one had anticipated. Earth, once considered a primitive backwater world, had united under the Terran Alliance, a power block with unmatched tactical brilliance. The Zephyrians had underestimated them completely. Now Earth's influence stretched across 3 star systems, and its citizens had become collectors. Slavery was officially banned, but the Cultural Rehabilitation Program allowed humans to purchase members of defeated species for reintegration and interspecies understanding. On paper, it sounded progressive. In reality, Liana was being sold like livestock. Starting bid 8,000 credits, the auctioneer roared. Bids came quickly. Someone raised it to 12,000, then 15,000, then 20,000 from a Terran merchant in expensive robes. Liana glanced up to see the bidder, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a simple gray uniform with a Terran Alliance insignia embossed in silver. His dark hair was neat, but his eyes looked weary, as though he carried invisible burdens. A jagged scar ran from his left ear to his chin. Unlike the others, leering and calculating, he simply looked resigned. Sold. Lot 943 goes to Commander Darius Thorn of Earth. Darius remained silent during the transport to his estate on Verdant Moon. Liana sat across from him in the passenger compartment, still shackled, still defiant despite her fear. "You don't have to keep me," she said after an hour of oppressive silence. "Whatever twisted fantasy you have about owning a Zephyrian princess, you'll grow bored. They all do." He didn't react to her provocation. "I didn't purchase you for that." "Then what? A trophy for your quarters? Proof of your conquest?" Darius looked at her with eyes that weren't cruel, but weren't empty either. "I was a prisoner, once. During the Battle of Kepler Station, 6 months in a Zephyrian detention facility." She blinked. That wasn't in any Terran historical record she knew of. "I'm not your enemy," he said quietly. Verdant Moon was nothing like the military installation she'd expected. It was lush and green, with towering crystal formations that caught the light and cast rainbow patterns across rolling meadows. The estate itself was modest but elegant, clean lines, large windows, and an atmosphere of peaceful solitude. "Your quarters are down this corridor," Darius said simply. "You'll find fresh clothing and a personal communicator. The doors aren't locked." Liana stared at him in confusion. "You're just letting me roam free?" "I didn't buy you to imprison you. I bought you to save you. But the program requires a 3-month rehabilitation period before you're eligible for repatriation to Zephyrian refugee settlements." She crossed her arms defensively. "So I'm still a prisoner?" "No," Darius replied with quiet conviction. "You're a guest with paperwork." The first week, Liana barely left her room. She ate meals in solitude, bathed only when necessary, and avoided any contact with Darius. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that his kindness was merely a prelude to something worse. Darius never pushed her boundaries. He worked long hours in his laboratory, reviewing stellar cartography data, attending holographic conferences with Alliance officials, and maintaining his research on xenobotanical specimens. He never attempted to enter her quarters or demand her presence. On the 8th day, curiosity finally overcame caution. She wandered into the estate's greenhouse and found Darius tending to an exotic flowering vine with luminescent purple blooms. "You garden?" she asked, genuinely surprised. He glanced up, perspiration on his forehead. "Helps me think clearly." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're supposed to be a war hero. I didn't think military heroes spent their time nurturing plants." That earned a slight chuckle. "That's precisely why most conflicts escalate unnecessarily. Too many generals, not enough gardeners." She settled onto a stone bench, watching him work. Something about his calm demeanor unsettled her in ways she couldn't articulate. He wasn't what she'd expected from human males, not aggressive, not predatory, not demanding. He was patient, even when she tested his limits with sharp words and deliberate provocations. "I don't trust you," she said one afternoon as he carefully transplanted seedlings. He nodded without looking up. "That's completely reasonable. But I want to understand your motivations." "Also reasonable." And so they began to talk. Gradually, tentatively, like two wounded animals learning that the other might not attack. She learned that he'd grown up in the agricultural districts of Earth, joined the Alliance Navy to escape poverty, and had watched his entire squadron perish during a reconnaissance mission gone wrong. He learned that she had been a cultural, attache's daughter, trained in linguistics and interstellar diplomacy. She had witnessed her family's execution during the siege of New Zephyr, the capital city of their homeworld. They discovered they weren't so different, both orphaned by war, both carrying scars that would never fully heal. One evening, during Verdant Moon's spectacular aurora season, she found herself actually laughing at one of Darius's dry observations about Terran cuisine. "You have this processed food called flavor crystals. It sounds like a chemistry experiment gone wrong." "Don't mock it until you've tried it," he replied with mock seriousness. Their eyes met across the dinner table, and for a moment the space between them hummed with something unspoken and electric. He looked away first, as if afraid of what he might see reflected in her gaze. By the end of the second month, Liana no longer wore the formal robes she'd arrived in. She dressed in simple tunics, shared meals with Darius, and even began assisting with his botanical research. She discovered she had a natural aptitude for understanding plant genetics, knowledge that seemed to fascinate rather than threaten him. "You could have been a scientist," he told her one day as she successfully grafted two different species together. "And you could have been a diplomat instead of a soldier," she replied. "We both chose different paths." "Sometimes paths choose us," he said quietly. And she wondered if he was talking about the war, or about her presence in his life, or both. Late one night she found him standing on the observatory deck, staring up at the stars. Without thinking, she joined him in the comfortable silence. For the first time since her capture, Liana felt something other than fear or anger. She felt peaceful. "The rehabilitation period ends in 2 weeks," Darius said suddenly. "I know. You'll be free to go wherever you choose." She looked at his profile in the starlight. "And what about you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I'll return to what I've always known. Reports, protocols, duty. The Alliance always needs experienced officers." Something in his voice, resignation mixed with loneliness, made her chest tighten with an emotion she didn't want to name. Learning to navigate human customs proved more challenging than Liana had anticipated. Simple things, like the way humans maintained eye contact during conversations, or their tendency to shake hands instead of the traditional Zephyrian gesture of touching foreheads, felt alien and uncomfortable. Darius proved patient with her cultural missteps. When she accidentally used formal diplomatic language during casual dinner conversation, he gently corrected her with humor rather than criticism. When she struggled with human utensils designed for different hand anatomy, he quietly provided Zephyrian-style eating implements without making her feel inadequate. "You don't have to change everything about yourself," he told her one morning as she frustrated herself trying to prepare coffee the human way. "Some differences are worth preserving. But I need to understand your world if I'm going to survive in it," she replied, accidentally spilling the hot liquid. He handed her a towel. Survival and adaptation aren't the same thing. You can learn our ways without losing your own. The breakthrough came during their work in his laboratory. Darius was struggling with an analysis of soil samples from various worlds, trying to determine which might support Earth crops for colonial expansion. Liana watched him work for several days before finally speaking up. "You're approaching this incorrectly," she said hesitantly. He looked up from his microscope, eyebrows raised but not offended. "How so?" Zephyrian agricultural science focuses on symbiosis rather than dominance. Instead of forcing Earth plants to adapt to alien soil, why not find ways for them to cooperate with native microorganisms? She showed him techniques from her homeworld, methods of soil analysis that considered the living ecosystem rather than just chemical composition. Within hours, they had identified 3 potential colonial sites that his previous methods had rejected. "This is brilliant," Darius said, studying their results. "Your approach could revolutionize terraforming science." For the first time since her capture, Liana felt valued for her mind rather than her exotic appearance. They began working together every day, combining human technology with Zephyrian ecological wisdom. The collaboration revealed how much both cultures could gain from genuine partnership rather than conquest. But it also revealed something else, the growing connection between them that neither wanted to acknowledge. One afternoon, while analyzing crystal formations from Verdant Moon itself, their hands brushed as they reached for the same sample. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Liana, and she saw surprise reflected in Darius's eyes as well. "I should apologize," he said quietly, pulling his hand back. "For what?" she asked, confused by the sudden tension. "For this. The situation. You shouldn't have to feel grateful to me just because I haven't mistreated you. That's not how—" He struggled for words. "That's not how feelings should develop." She stared at him, realizing he'd recognized what she was only beginning to understand herself. "You think I'm confusing gratitude with something else, aren't you?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Liana found herself studying his face, the scar that spoke of battles fought, the eyes that held intelligence and kindness in equal measure, the mouth that curved into rare but genuine smiles. "Maybe I was initially," she admitted, "but not anymore. Liana, you saved me, yes, but more than that, you've shown me what humans can be at their best. You've listened to my ideas, respected my knowledge, treated me as an equal." She took a breath. "Is it so impossible that I might care about you for who you are, not just what you've done for me?" He was quiet for a long moment, internal conflict clear on his features. "The power dynamic between us will exist until I'm officially free," she finished. "I know. But what happens after that? What happens when I have real choices again?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've never been in this situation before." "Neither have I." That evening they worked in comfortable silence, but the air between them hummed with new possibilities and complications. Both were acutely aware that in less than a week, everything would change, one way or another. On the final day of the third month, Darius handed Liana a data tablet with trembling fingers. The official seal of the Terran Alliance glowed at the top of the screen. "Your emancipation certificate," he said quietly. "It'll be processed by morning. You'll be officially free, no longer under any legal obligation to remain here or anywhere else you don't choose." Liana stared at the document that represented everything she'd dreamed of for 3 months. Freedom, choice, the ability to seek out other Zephyrian survivors and rebuild some semblance of her former life. "I can leave immediately?" she whispered. "Yes. There's a transport to the Zephyrian refugee settlement on Sanctuary Station tomorrow evening. I've already arranged passage if you want it." She looked up from the tablet to find him studying her face with an expression she couldn't quite read. "And what happens to you?" He managed a small, sad smile. "I return to active duty. The Alliance has offered me command of a deep space exploration vessel. It's a good opportunity." "Deep space," she repeated. How long would you be gone? Minimum 5 years. Possibly longer, depending on what we discover. Something cold settled in her chest. So this is goodbye. It doesn't have to be, he said carefully. You'll always be welcome here. This place, these 3 months, they've meant something to me. I hope they've meant something to you too. That night neither of them slept. Leanna lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, the emancipation tablet glowing softly on her nightstand. Everything she'd wanted was now within reach. Freedom, safety among her own people, a chance to start over without the constant reminder of how far she'd fallen. So why did the thought of leaving make her feel hollow inside? At dawn, she found Darius in the greenhouse tending to the luminescent flowers they'd cultivated together. His hands moved with practiced gentleness among the delicate blooms, but she could see tension in the set of his shoulders. I've been thinking, she said softly. He turned, hope and resignation warring in his expression. About choices, real choices. She moved closer, her bare feet silent on the cool floor. 3 months ago, I had no agency, no voice in my own fate. Every decision was made for me. By the war, by the auction, by legal documents I had no part in creating. And now, for the first time since the fall of New Zephyr, I get to choose my own path. She reached out to touch one of the flowers, its petals warm and slightly luminous under her fingertips. When I arrived here, I hated you. I hated everything you represented, the conquest, the ownership, the casual destruction of my world. Darius flinched slightly but didn't look away. But in 3 months, you never once treated me as property. You listened to my ideas, valued my knowledge, respected my autonomy even when the law said you didn't have to. She turned to face him fully. You showed me what humanity could be at its best. Leanna. His voice was rough with emotion. You gave me my freedom, she continued, stepping closer. Now I choose what to do with it. What are you saying? She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar that marked him as surely as her golden skin marked her. I'm saying I don't want to leave. Not because I have to stay, not out of gratitude or obligation or trauma bonding. She smiled, and it was the first completely genuine smile she'd worn in years. I want to stay because I care about you, Darius Thorne, because I want to see what we might build together, as equals. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Are you certain? Once you make this choice, once you turn down that transport, I'll still be free, she said firmly. Free to leave anytime I want. Free to change my mind. Free to love you. She paused. Because that's what this is, isn't it? Love? When he opened his eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. I never intended for this to happen. Neither did I. But here we are. Here we are, he agreed. And finally, carefully, he kissed her. It tasted like hope and new beginnings, like flowers blooming in soil once thought barren. It tasted like choice freely made and hearts freely given. Darius and Leanna didn't fall in love all at once. It grew like the flowers in their greenhouse, slowly, steadily, and rooted in deep trust. There were difficult days ahead. Her trauma didn't vanish overnight, and his ghost from the war continued to haunt him. But they faced these challenges together. Love, they discovered, wasn't just about grand gestures or passionate declarations. It was found in quiet moments. Darius bringing her tea made with herbs from her homeworld that he'd painstakingly researched and cultivated. Leanna staying up all night when his nightmares were particularly bad, holding him until dawn broke over. Verdant moon. Their work together became legendary in scientific circles. The Thorne Solace method of ecological integration revolutionized terraforming across the galaxy. Rather than imposing Earth ecosystems on conquered worlds, colonies began to develop symbiotic relationships with native life forms. Their research station on Verdant Moon became a pilgrimage site for xenobotanists and ecological engineers. But their greatest challenge came from outside their peaceful sanctuary. Both human and Zephyrian societies struggled to accept their union. Some humans saw Lyanna as the exotic trophy, proof of their species' dominance. Some Zephyrians viewed her as a traitor who had embraced her captors. "Let them talk," Darius said one evening as they read particularly harsh commentary on the galactic newsfeeds. "We know the truth of what we are to each other." "But it matters," Lyanna replied, her golden skin dimmed with sadness. "If we're going to make a difference, if we're going to show that our peoples can coexist, we need their acceptance. Then we earn it," he said simply, "not through words, but through actions." The opportunity came when tensions between the Terran Alliance and Zephyrian refugee settlements threatened to erupt into new conflict. Both sides requested mediators, and surprisingly, they asked for Darius and Lyanna specifically. "They want us because we're symbols," Lyanna observed as they prepared for the negotiations. "A human and a Zephyrian who found common ground." "Can you handle that responsibility?" Darius asked, concern evident in his voice. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "With you beside me, I can handle anything." The peace negotiations lasted 6 months. There were moments when violence seemed inevitable, when centuries of mistrust and recent wounds threatened to derail every conversation. But gradually, patient, Darius and Lyanna built bridges. They shared their research, showing how cooperation rather than domination could benefit both species. They told their story, not as a romance, but as proof that understanding was possible even after terrible harm had been done. Most importantly, they listened. To grieving Zephyrian parents who had lost children in the war, to human soldiers who carried guilt about orders they'd followed, to refugees struggling to build new lives and colonists trying to understand alien worlds.